Hello, Billionauts. How are you? I'm good. I'm good. I'm tired, but I'm good. I don't, as you probably know, I think I made a video and I posted it before. Um, I'm currently a bit busy, so I'm not reading a lot. Which, when I'm not reading a lot, is when I'm daydreaming more about things I want to read. Like I make more reading projects, and then very rarely do I have enough time to match my expectations. But I mean, like, although I'm very ambitious, all my projects that are keeping me busy in some way or another are leading me to that climatic point in my life in which I will have all the perfect conditions to actually read. And unlike many other people who says that and then they never get there, I am actually moving that direction, and every single day I'm closer to having the time and the freedom and the room of my own that I need for all the things that I like to do. And yeah, that's it. Like in most cases, I don't get to. In most cases, I don't get to read because I choose not to, because I have other things that are my priorities. But lately, for this past month, it's just real world responsibilities that are a bit beyond me, and that I have accepted, not because I wanted them, but because I wanted the things that they get me close to achieving. So yeah, that's it. I'm just having to put the big boy pants for just a month, not too much. I'm not very comfortable with those pants, and therefore I might not be making like a review a day like I was at some point making, not a review but like a video a day. But I do have a video for you. I have a video in response to Brian's video on Bookish, which is a video that like was also. I mean, he had a response from David Novak as well, and probably a bunch of other people that I just haven't had the time to check in BookTube. But it's a video about like 10 hard books you don't have to read. Now, I went through hard books I have read that you don't have to read, and they are also hard books that I'm not even mentioning, worth mentioning, because they're like, I mean, most hard books that I've read are philosophy books. Philosophy books, when they are hard, they tend to be harder than any novel that you could mention, way harder than any novel that you could mention, but also way more isolated from the real world and from people who is not interested in the academia than you would want to know about. So rather than like sitting down here and talking to you about 1,000 plateaus or anything like that, or some like Indian mysticists from like who know how long BC, I'll talk to you about 10 hard books that you don't have to read, but I will. I feel like that gives it like an interesting twist to the video, rather than me just like talking about how many hard books I've read, and also because it's books that I will read, as opposed to books that I have read that I might or might not be happy about having read those books. These are 10 hard books that I actually like think there are reasons to read. Like there is, I still continue as of today. I want to read them. Therefore, there are reasons to read these books. However, you don't have to read them, and that's probably a theme I'll return to on this channel. I've already made a video which I will link in the description, apart from David Novak's and Brian's video. Apart from their videos, I'll also link a video I made about must you read. Must you read as a whole? Must you read any books? Because BookTube is a very friendly, our BookTube, our small area of BookTube, is a very friendly place, and the people doesn't want to be pretentious, and they don't want to be like telling you what you have to do or anything like that. And that therefore I feel like it's pretty much a maxim throughout BookTube that you don't have to read, or read any books for that matter. And I agree in the sense that when people says that you have to read something, what they really mean is that there is something you need to know because it affects you directly in the real world, or because what you do by not knowing that thing affects others, or the world itself, right? So maybe a book about the climate, or a book about like I don't know, animal torture and in the meat industry, or a book about like what Israel is doing right now to Palestine, books like that, right? But the reason why I don't think that is the case as a general maxim that you need to read any book at all. Is because what they're saying is that there is information you need to have, and that information, that knowledge, you can acquire through many other means. Books might be the most polished form of writing, and writing is by far the most sophisticated and plausible form of human thought, expression of human thought. I don't think that we, outside of our minds, can express thought better than through writing. And because of that, it turns out that sometimes things that you need to know find their best expression in books, but there are articles, there are newspapers, there are reports, there are documentaries and movies that might sometimes be a much better expression of that thing that you are supposed to know. And because of that, as a rule of thumb or as a general law, I don't think that you need to read any books. However, there would be a more individual case-to-case case to make about why you would need or should read a book, and that is whether or not you want, or whether or not you have gave yourself the sense of accountability toward that book. You gave yourself like a duty, or like, I want to read this book, I will read this book. You've created a commitment, and then you're gonna read it, right? For me, I created a commitment a couple of years ago of reading all the important philosophers in the history of philosophy. And I pretty much did. There is not that many. I know that might sound like, a bold claim or impressive, but if you really look at the history of philosophy, the important philosophers are almost not many more than 50. With reading like less than 100 books, you could have read like the philosophy canon as a whole, without leaving anything very important outside of it. That is not saying that you would have a full understanding of like the philosophical landscape nowadays, but it's not a difficult project. Now, when I was reading all of those books, I was not particularly enjoying myself or loving some of the books. It was a project in which I attached to myself. I basically gave myself the sense of accountability or duty, or having to read certain books because I wanted to be a person who understands the conversation that philosophy is going through and has been going through since the last couple thousand years. That being said, I guess that some of the reasons why these books that I will read and you don't have to are the same, are more individual, right? If they were books that you must read because they're so relevant, then I wouldn't say books you don't have to read, because I suggested a moment ago there might be books that you have to read, and I'll probably make a video about that. So these books that are hard, that you don't have to read, and somehow I'm gonna read, because to a degree, I guess if I am gonna read, it's because I want to read them. If I want to read them, then I must read them, because that's what I'm here for, right? That's what we're all here for, to do the things that we can do before we cannot do anything else forever. That being said, let's get to the books. And now these books, sort of like that have that we call hard, right? They're hard for different reasons, and they are hard for me. They might not be so hard for you, like just like as I said a moment ago, certain essays or certain philosophy books or books about, like, I don't know, underwater physics or something like that might not be hard for me because there are things that are more specialized on, but they are certainly hard for me. Now, the first book, it's Life and Fate by Vasily Grossman. All I know about this book is that it's supposed to be the War and Peace of the Second World War. And for some reason, this is a book that it comes across as hard. It's not particularly thick. It's definitely a big book, because every man, the way they print their books, they make them look thinner than they actually are, because I don't know, the pages are very thin. I don't know how it is, but very thick books will often look not so thick, not like chunkers when it comes to Everyman hardcovers. And this is one of those cases. This is an 850 pages book, and I'm expecting it to be potentially slow and very Russian in ways that might not make it very easy. I also will probably make it extra hard because this is part of a project that I will do at some point where I will read a couple more other things relating to the Second World War in general. It's a period of our history which might be the most relevant one in the last millennia. Who knows? I don't know that much about history to make that claim, but definitely it feels like that to me. And because of that, to a degree, this is a hard book that you don't have to read, because why would you? You don't have to read it if you don't want to. But I think that I am definitely going to read it. I don't know when. This copy I took, but it's actually from my from my partner, so I'll have to get my own. Probably I'll get it in Spanish, since I find it's sometimes the case that Russian translations are better in Spanish. So I'll probably read an Spanish edition of this book. Okay. What else? Should I leave the biggest and hardest for the end? I'll do that, since it's also a reading project that is going to take me through the whole summer. I'll leave the hardest book for the end. Then we have Montaigne's essays. I have no idea how each individual essay in this book is, how difficult it is. And definitely, because of the distance in time and in expression and everything, I'm sure it's going to be hard in some ways, especially at the beginning. It's probably going to be even harder because I intend to read all of this in English and then read it in French. So I'm going to read this twice. I've read some of the essays a long time ago, and I remember liking them a lot. And I thought that it would be I want to do that with a classic, right? That I would read it first in a translation and then in French, so that I would start improving my French a little bit more, since maybe my next destination after the summer would be a French country potentially. I don't know. I feel like improving on French, since I'm already so close to being fluent. So yeah, this is gonna be long because it's gonna take me longer than it's already a chunker, and I might read it twice in some, or at least partially twice. Yeah, another chunker. Length here is a theme. I am not a very fast reader. I do read twice as fast in Spanish as I read in English, but still not fast like some people here in Booktube. At some point this year, I'm planning to do a 6 month. I believe 6 months is a fair amount of time to give it a try, to remove my subvocalization completely, to stop subvocalizing. But I don't have the time or focus now. I really want to understand and read the books that I'm reading. And if I stop subvocalizing now, I'm just going to be looking at pages without actually remembering what I'm reading and having to reread it endlessly. And I have already way too many challenges to add another one. So I'll probably do that once I'm done with every other thing. Probably by the end of the year, I'll make a video about that, and maybe even make like a blog report about how am I progressing on this subvocalizing or not subvocalizing enterprise, which seems to be, until you don't try it, you don't know, but I have it on good sources that it's completely possible to stop doing, and it supposedly would significantly increase your reading speed, which would make some of these books way less challenging, because the length is the thing that keeps me away from them. I have the capacity to read for, and this is why this is the reason why I have sometimes acquired like reading counts in certain, like I've had months in my life where I've read a book every day, which it's, for most people, it's an insane amount of books, but that has never been because I read fast. I promise you, I don't read fast. It's because I am able to read full time. I don't lose focus, or at least when I start losing focus, I don't like give up. I don't know. I'm able to read endlessly. I don't have a moment when I'm like, oh my god. Sometimes, especially when I started reading, I would lose my eyesight a little bit. I would need to like look away from a while. It's not happening anymore, so that's good. And the only problem now is just real life, like this job that I have now. I'm working 12 hours a day, and I have like a half an hour break. So I don't think that I'm gonna be able to read, Montaigne's essays in half an hour. But if I didn't have anything like I did before going to university, then that would have been like, it wouldn't have been a problem for me to just read the whole day, especially here, because I'm not a big fan of England. I'm not gonna say the UK, but definitely south, east, like everything an hour north, an hour west and everything else on the outskirts of London, England. Like far north England is fine, West England is fine, but everything else is just not to my liking. Too way too civilized, way too like everything is suburban. There's no nature at all. There's nothing to do. So it's a perfect environment to really close yourself in a room and only read. I wish I could do that for the last couple of weeks I was here, because I could, I just could do that, but I have, as I said, many other projects. So what else? Yeah, and this one, this is a book I'm going in knowing nothing about. I just love the title. I know that it's one of the favorite books of one of my booktube friends from Sailing Through Books. I think she made a video about this, and I've heard it recommended in other channels, sometimes with a bit of reserve, especially Steve has some reservation when recommending this book, because it tends to be a book that like people who, let's say that booktube Doug Bros would read, supposedly. I don't know about that. I am interested in the book. It's thick and also bigger, like it's bigger than a normal Penguin. You can see here the difference. But I'm gonna read this, and I'm probably gonna be reading it with my partner because he also has a copy. I think this one I'm holding is hers. So maybe I'll even make a like a chat afterwards or something. Yeah, just as I love books in which like a person gets obsessed with one subject and tries to contain it like to its like to the most like minutest detail, and they just get lost in it for as long as it's required and forget about anything else. And this seems to be that kind of book, and the Savisude seems to be melancholy. So that's that's more than enough. What else? Okay, yeah. This is I have a project, which is I want to at least one month a year. Maybe I'm gonna extend it to 2 months, because I'm realizing that like 1 month might not be enough. I want to at least 1 month a year choose one author and read everything they wrote. There are many authors in my mind for this year, and it's gonna happen in autumn every year. And there are many authors in my mind every year. For this year, Thomas Mann is one of them. And the book that I wanted to hold is The Magic Mountain, which is a book that I've been wanting to read for a long time. And I had The Magic Mountain in Spanish as a kid. I took it because I thought it was a completely different kind of book. And but it was like, I don't know, 12 or something like that. And I opened it and I read it, but I very soon left it aside. And then I got The Maggot from John Fowles, which is also a completely different kind of book to what I was expecting, but I ended up reading that one. What I was looking was for a fantasy book, and I wanted a thick fantasy book, so I took those two. And yeah, like since then it's always been on my mind. And then then I realized that it was actually like a book that keeps being recommended by many people, like a Spanish comedian that I love, who was also like the very first YouTuber I ever followed in this platform as a whole. Said that it's his favorite book, like back in 2010 or something like that, or 2012 or 13, something like that, like long time ago. And since then it's always been in my mind. I just never came across the book until recently. I have the book right now waiting for me in Spain, so it's something that I'll probably be touching in Spain, but I'll read it as a part of a bigger project, which is reading all Thomas Mann, which hopefully will be this year. There are other authors that I also wanted to dedicate like a whole 2 months or 1 month to reading everything they wrote, or everything that I am interested on that they wrote, such as Virginia Woolf. I want to read a lot, not all, but because I'm not going to read her diaries, maybe a selection. But Virginia Woolf, I want to read like everything she wrote, and I also want to do the same with Ursula K. Le Guin. I want to do the same with Samuel Delany. So I don't know, maybe what I might do is like I might make 2025 a year in which, rather than separating the year into books, I separate it into authors. And rather than reading like 100 books or 70 books or 50 books or how much time I have, I read like 10 authors and just like submerge myself properly in each author. That'd be cool. So yeah, this is just representing The Magic Mountain, although this is not The Magic Mountain, which is one of the books that I'm going to read from Thomas Mann. What else? Well, this one requires no introduction. I've already talked about this in the channel for a long time, quite a few times. I keep, like every now and then I find a play in London and I go watch it and then I read the play here, and I'm gonna keep doing that until I have individually watched and read every single play here, and then I'll read the book cover to cover. But this is probably, like, to me, the most imponent book, because I don't know, Shakespeare, in the original in Spanish, I did fall in love as a kid. I learned the dialogues from Romeo and Juliet, and I also remember loving Othello and Hamlet, but I mean, I was a kid and it was in Spanish. I want this to get through me. Like, I want to actually enjoy it on English, and for some reason it's just Shakespeare, because I love plays. I read a lot of plays. For example, Chekhov, I've read all of his plays. I haven't read almost any. I've read only a few of his stories, but I've read all of his plays. So it shouldn't be difficult, but it is difficult for me to, like, because I don't just want to, like, read Shakespeare. I want to get Shakespeare. I want to get, like, what's up. Well, why have so many people says this is, like, one of the best writers ever, and it's, as I said, is I remember it coming through years ago when I read Romeo and Juliet in Spanish, but I'm nowhere near there. It's an author that is taking me a little bit more to hack, and this is a book that I want to read cover to cover and, like, properly submerge myself into it. So there you go, another hard book that you don't have to read, because it doesn't matter how important Shakespeare is. It's important to people, like 99% of people in the world doesn't even read. So how important can Shakespeare be when, like, most people doesn't even know his name? Of course, yes, in your society, people does know his name, but if you go to Burundi, no one knows his name. And knowing his name and having read him or watched anything from him is two different things. So you don't have to read Shakespeare. But I mean, I'm sure many people would make the case here that, like, if you were to read at all, you might as well read this. What else? Yes. Another book that has come up a couple of times in this channel, and this is an example of a book that I don't consider hard, and also it's not about the length. It's about the fact that, like, I don't just want to, as I said before, read it. I want to study it. I want to know everything that has to do with this. I might even, like, at some point get, like, an online course or something that gives me, like, more secondary material and stuff, and I'll do, like, a whole month on this book, and I'll probably do a read along and everything. But as I try to understand this book, and I will do the same with other important religious books, but this is the most important of them all in terms of its influence. So yeah, that's the reason. It's because of the time I want to dedicate to it that it's so hard for me to start it, not because the book itself is so hard. I don't think it's hard. Same thing here. And this is a open question. I don't know if you think that as a human in the world you ought to know a little bit of world history. I read a world history book every year. Like, it's I love reading world histories. I think it's a great way to, like, familiarize yourself with, like, 1,000 things at once. Of course, every time you read a world history, it's the things that you are not reading are much greater than the things that you're reading about. It's always going to be biased in every way, culturally and just cognitively. It's impossible to contain the world in a book, and that's why I like to, at some point, read a multi-volume world history. Find one that, like, is truly that it truly feels like not definitive, but as close as you can, to, like, really containing everything from, like, multiple perspectives. This is probably the most canonic. I don't know canonic is the word, but this is probably the most consensual, neither. The most Western, the most popular, the most expected history to read. Like, I mean, this is a Penguin world history, right? So I'm expecting that there are gonna be many things that happened in the world that were happening that are not gonna be here. It's often the case with world histories that you learn more about it, writers' biases and their own context than you learn about, like, the world itself. That's why I if you were to read world histories, I'd say read many. Don't read just one. At some point, I'd love to make a world history ranking or top or starter kit. This one I heard about from Steve Donoghy's book video of a world history starter kit, in which he discovered me this and also the history of civilizations from a different author I don't remember. And the history of civilizations I wasn't interested about, but this one I wanted to read. And I mean, there are other world histories that I'm looking forward to read. Another one that came out on a top on Open Letters Reviews recently is the Frankopan world history. But way before that, and way before, for a long time, I've been wanting to read The Dawn of Everything, which is being recommended by a philosopher from Spain. And that's, you don't need to read world histories, although you ought to be familiarized with your historical context and spatial context as well, geographical context and political context, I guess. But I think that maybe a 1-volume thick world history would be a way to do that, at least to give you like a very, very rough understanding of where you are at and what came before. But I really, really don't think that a book can do it. I think that it probably the internet, a couple of documentaries. I think it's, in this case, quantity is better than quality, in the sense that, like, because they're always gonna be biased, because they're always gonna be limited. It's better if you cannot read like 4 or 5 books like this about the world. I think it's better that you watch 4 or 5 documentaries or something like that. For me, this is like an ongoing thing. I'm gonna read world histories forever. I think they're very fun. But I don't know that single volume books about the world are the best way to approach this without you ending up like having wrong conceptions about how world history actually happened. And finally, probably my most ambitious reading project, not this year, but so far, except for what I said before about like reading all the important philosophers, which it's something that's been completed. I wrote a list and I read them. I think I'm gonna say that there are probably like a handful, like 4 philosophers that I haven't read out yet, that I haven't read like their magnum opus yet. For example, in Thomas Aquinas, I never read like the Summa Theologica or anything like that. What I read was selections of his writings. But in terms of like a single work rather than like a major sort of like overarching thing, this is my most ambitious project so far, and it's part of a longer project, which is reading histories about ancient civilizations and learning a little bit more, especially about probably the most relevant one, definitely the most recently directly influential towards us, which is, I don't know if they're in order, I don't think so, but the decline and fall, the history of the decline and fall of the Roman Empire, the 3 volumes, cover to cover, no abridged versions or anything, the actual 3 cover to cover. This is one of the things that I'm probably gonna be reading this summer. We'll see about that. I am not like 1,000,000% sure about this, because I have to be, like, I have to consider the weight of this and how am I gonna approach it and how strict I am gonna be, because I am sure it doesn't matter how good this book is, how the book this 3 book is, I am sure it's gonna become tedious at some point. And I am only gonna open the first page of this first volume if I am willing to close at some point the last page of the 3rd volume. So I am in the process of considering that. I'm not gonna keep holding this because it's quite heavy, but yeah, in terms of length, this is like as hard as it gets. Maybe I use this as the series of books in which I'm gonna train to stop sub-vocalizing. That would be fun, because I imagine that once you are like beyond the like after the first volume, you're gonna know where you are at, and like I find it much easier to read faster and to understand where I am at, and not to think so much when I'm reading, when I am like reading a long work, or when I'm reading like a second volume of a series of books, because I already know everything that's came before. I kind of like can see forward, I see what's coming, and I understand the author as well, how he writes. So yeah, I mean that's there. I'm gonna open it a couple of times throughout this next couple of months, and just read separate passages from each volume to see if it really speaks to me, because I really don't want to like say I'm starting this, I'm reading this, and then not actually finishing it. And along with that, I'm gonna be reading other things related to like Rome. I want to basically finish the summer. If I choose this as my summer project, I want to finish the summer having like a good idea of Rome, like understanding like Roman history to like a on a maybe undergraduate level degree, like having done as some of like my friends who do like a Roman history class throughout like a whole year, something like that, but in 3 months in the summer. I don't think that you need a year to learn anything. I think you can learn anything in less than 6 months, and I mean it. I really mean anything. It's been the case in the past for me that when I want to learn something, if I have the time, that's the only thing. You have to have the time. You have to have enough time, and that's the thing that I'm having to like balance out here. But if you have like the 24 hours of your day for you for the next 3 months, in 3 months you can learn about anything. You can become an expert in anything. That might be a bold claim, but it's only because you haven't tried it. What you gonna know? What you gonna read? Like you gonna know like music theory, okay? Give yourself 3 months, 24 hours a day, just studying that. By the end of those 3 months, you are not gonna have you are not. It's not gonna be different. It's not gonna be very different what you know from what like a postgraduate student of music is gonna know. But it's only if you are willing to like study for like insane amounts of hours and be properly engaged with the subject that you choose. Most people, whatever they are studying, they are not studying because they want to, and that's what makes them suck at it. As I said, like I'm in university, like I barely know people who know the thing that they're studying, because they are not studying it. They're just like paying tuition fees for the sake of it, for like spending time in university and socializing. But no one is really, almost no one studies. Almost no one actually sits down and like looks at a subject and really gets to the chase. So yeah, those are like the many books that should I do this? I don't know that I can actually hold all of them. They will be way too much. This is already bigger than the screen. Let's see, I can still add 2 more. Okay, yeah, that exceeds the screen's length and is missing Shakespeare. But there you go, quite a few books that I am going to read, but you don't have to. And that was, so I guess the point of this video was that you don't have to read these books. I'm sure there are many books that you want to read though, that I don't have to read either. But I also think that perhaps there is such a thing as books that you have to read, that you should read. I think that this would be like an amazing discussion video to continue in BookTube. I'm curious about whether or not anyone else agrees with me that there might be things that you ought to know, things that you should read, because books that you should read because they're the things that you should know are inside those books and nowhere else. Perhaps are there other reasons why you would have to read a book? Yeah, I mean, like, let me know what you think about that. If you have a channel, make a video. If not, let me know in the comments. I'll link my previous video about the question of must you read as a whole in the description, but I'm more interested in what you have to say, so let me know. See you on the other side. Thank you, BookTube.